Hello Star Wars fans and welcome to the video. I am Entropy. Today I want to present my list of what I'd like to see from Star Wars. We've been getting quite a bit lately and we've also had quite a bit announced. Lucasfilm and their announcements haven't gone too well in recent years though. While on one hand I applaud the commitment to finding the right person for the right project, on the other I'd like to actually see another Star Wars movie one of these years. So in this video I will be going into the top things I'd like to see from Star Wars in the future. This list will start with what I'd most like to see, with priority decreasing as the list goes on. So without further ado, let's get into my list. First up, I have Clone Wars Remastered. So you know how the final season of Clone Wars, the Tales series, and the Bad Batch all have this god-tier animation? Like it's one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen? That style of course comes from Clone Wars, but it has been perfected in recent years. What I'm suggesting here is to go back to the movie and first 6 seasons of the show and upgrade them to the animation quality of Lucasfilm today. Imagine Rookies, or the Malevolence arc, or the Mortis arc in that high-quality animation. And while you're at it, maybe just go ahead and give Ahsoka a different outfit so we can all stop being a little uncomfortable whenever we watch the earlier seasons. What you did in Ahsoka's second Tales of the Jedi episode looked pretty good, so just go with that. In addition to just remastering previous episodes though, I'd also like to see more of the missing episodes. You see, Clone Wars has many missing episodes because while Lucasfilm decided to bring it back for a 7th and final season in 2020 after it was cancelled in 2012, they still did not complete many stories intended for the show before its cancellation. The original plan was for 8 seasons with an average of like 22 episodes each. Now, some of the missing stories aren't really necessary for the show, but some of them are vital to the overall show and to other Star Wars stories as well. Not having them can make it feel like something is missing. Now, I don't expect to get the full 8-season original plan, but there are certain arcs we know about that I think deserve adaptation in the show. In order of highest priority, or most important to the show, first we have Dark Disciple. This story, above any other, I think is the most important to bring to the actual show, especially after this recent Tales season. This was supposed to be the final story of Asajj Ventress in Clone Wars, a fantastic character with an amazing arc that I think needed to be completed in the show. There is a novel adaptation of this, so the story exists, even if it isn't in the show. The story was always meant for the show, though, and it brings finality to Ventress' story in Clone Wars. It was intended as a huge 8-episode story arc featuring Asajj Ventress and Quinlan Vos. The Jedi Council gave Vos the mission of assassinating Dooku, and they want him to recruit Ventress. It's a great story that confronts Ventress with her past, both the pain inflicted on her and by her. There's also a romance between Ventress and Vos, which adds more drama. It's got action, it's personal, and it should be made for the show. And with that sweet, sweet new animation. Ventress needs her story completed, and that's why this is at the top of my list. And, as I said, it's even more important now that the new Tales series has come out with a Ventress arc that continues after Dark Disciple. But this is not the only unmade Clone Wars arc that is still actually canon and is built upon by future stories. Next of those would be Son of Dathomir. This story has also been adapted, this one as a comic book series though. It was originally intended as a 4-episode arc for the show. This story follows Maul's capture by Sidious in Season 5. This story is referenced in the Siege of Mandalore arc, with Maul crediting his Mandalorian followers with his escape from Sidious. This story is probably the coolest unmade story arc for Clone Wars. Sidious wants to use Maul to draw out Mother Talzin, who he views as a threat. The Mandalorians break him out, you get to see Maul and Grievous fight, Maul and Dooku interact, lots of story stuff that I'm sure most would like to see explored in the show. And this obviously fills in a gap in Maul's story that, without being filled, might leave a new viewer wondering if they've missed something. That being him being captured by Sidious in Season 5, but then back on Mandalore in Season 7. He does say that his Mandalorian followers broke him out in a very quick throwaway line, but I'd like to actually see that in the show. And the story is just so frickin' cool. My third arc here is the Boba Fett and Cad Bane arc. This story is referenced in the Book of Boba Fett TV show, but was never actually made in any form. This arc would have featured Boba Fett and Cad Bane teaming up during the Clone Wars time period, when Boba is quite young. This likely would have shown the influence that Cad Bane had on Boba, and we know from previous animations that we would have seen the origin of the dent in Boba's helmet. It was Cad Bane. And of course, we'd see Boba don the classic armor for the first time chronologically. This story, different to Son of Dathomir and Dark Disciple, is not filling in a gap, it's the missing first part to a story that ends in Book of Boba Fett. Book of Boba Fett is relying on the drama and character relationships of a project that doesn't actually exist in any form. No comic book or novel adaptation here. Sure, you can infer their relationship, but again, I'd like to actually see it. I would love for this to be rectified and have this cool Cad Bane and Boba story that starts in Clone Wars and ends in the Mandoverse with Boba defeating him after he's grown as a character. Fourth would be the Kashyyyk arc featuring the Bad Batch and Yoda. This arc would have been a sequel to the first Bad Batch arc we did actually end up seeing in the final season of Clone Wars. We would have gotten to see the Bad Batch with Crosshair and Echo during the Clone Wars and before they knew Omega and before Order 66 here. I think this story would have helped establish that group and develop them before you really get into the meat with their spinoff. We also would have gotten the story behind the good relations with the Wookiees I have line from Yoda in Revenge of the Sith. And of course, we would have delved further into Kashyyyk and its ecosystem. I'd say this arc isn't top priority, but it would certainly go a long way in furthering the quality of the Bad Batch's story. And it's the backstory of Yoda and the Wookiees, who doesn't want to see that. My fifth arc is the Utapau arc, which shows that Obi-Wan had actually encountered Grievous on Utapau once before Revenge of the Sith, with Anakin there as well, but Anakin still not meeting Grievous because he can't because of overcomplicated Star Wars lore. This arc personally doesn't have too much that interests me more than the others I've mentioned. The difference, however, is that this arc was, as I understand it, very far in production. There is a fan-made completed animation of one of the scenes from it. It was made to go along with the fan-made animated version of the Mustafar fight, which is a really great video and you should go check it out. I do know the actual arc here does have some good stuff in it, though. It's got Anakin confronting his feelings about Ahsoka leaving the Order. I'll just say it would be a very fine addition to the Clone Wars collection. Because it's mostly done, and it does seem good, and seemingly would add good storytelling for the overall show, I say finish it. My sixth and final choice would be the Padme returning to Mon Cala arc, because I think Padme is underrated. It would have given us more politics and some more Mon Calamari stuff, which, of course, these are the guys providing a lot of the capital ships to the Rebellion later on, so we'd probably get a lot more seed planting by Padme for the Rebellion, which is really cool. But this is where we start to get into the arcs that had less progress in production. There's good stuff here, like more Padme, a Rex and R2 team-up, and a crazy one where Ahsoka finds out about a Sith shrine beneath the Jedi Temple, which has her team up with Anakin and Obi-Wan before the Siege of Mandalore. I love it if all of these were made. They sound like fun ideas, but those first five, and if possible my sixth, in that order, are the ones I'd say are most important to properly completing the show. I'd also say you could just make the movie the first episode of the show, like how Bad Batch has a longer first episode premiere. You could also shuffle around the episode order a bit as needed for each season just to make the pacing a bit better. For example, I think the Citadel arc would be better for the Season 3 final arc rather than the Padawan Lost arc. And as I said, we wouldn't see the entire show completed, just enough of it. I'll also say that for voice acting, I would of course like to see most of the original cast return where that's possible and when necessary. But two characters I'd like to talk about are Palpatine and Mon Mothma. So, Palpatine had two voice actors in the show because the first, Ian Abercrombie, passed away during the show and was replaced with Tim Curry, I believe around Season 6. I think Season 5 is the last one with Ian Abercrombie. Now, I love Tim Curry, I'm a big fan of his, but I'm not the biggest fan of his Palpatine. If they do this, I think they should either get Sam Witwer, which I know his Sidious is good, but I'm not sure about his Palpatine, or they should just get Ian McDiarmid, which I feel like that one's probably more likely considering they got him for Rebels and Bad Batch and some other stuff, I think, but I don't know. Now, Mon Mothma had a very small role in the Clone Wars, but she did have some lines. She was originally voiced by Kath Soucie, if I'm pronouncing that right, but I would actually recast her with Genevieve O'Reilly, who of course played the character in Revenge of the Sith, Rebels, Andor and Rogue One, and even the Mandoverse now with Ahsoka. To me, at this point, she's become pretty iconic and synonymous with the character, and I'd love it if she was the voice in Clone Wars too. With all that said, though, adding my top 6 choices with 4 episodes for each arc, except for Dark Disciple with 8, plus the movie, that adds 29 episodes to Clone Wars' current episode count of 133. That leaves us with 162 episodes total, so maybe 8 seasons with 20 episodes each, and the last season has 22 episodes? Maybe? They could also maybe just throw out and not remaster some of those Dookie episodes from earlier in the show, like Bombad Jedi, for example. I don't think you'll find many fans who are going to miss that episode, and in fact, I think you'll find a lot of fans who skip that episode on rewatch, so might as well just throw it out. Or they could just have different episode counts for each season. Whatever way they do it, though, I'd want at least my top 5 arcs, the movie, and the rest of the show all given the incredible modern Lucasfilm animation, presented as one show. Figuring out which episodes should stay and what order they'd go in is a whole nother video, though, so I won't go further here. But to finish this off, Lucasfilm, if you do this, or hell, even if you don't do this, I am begging you. Lucasfilm, Disney, Sony, whoever it is, I am begging. I'm on my knees. Release the full show on at least Blu-ray, but 4K would be peak. I need this entire show, even in its current state, on hard copy. Seasons 1 through 6 Blu-ray I don't think are printed anymore, or not much, and as such, the availability and price is crazy. Please, I'm on my knees. Fix this. And if you actually finish the show in the way I've described, and then release it as a box collection on 4K, oh man, I would never ask for anything again. But that's it for my Clone Wars ramblings, though, so we can move on to other things now. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the Mandoverse. Now, I honestly wouldn't say this is my favorite news story to come out of Kennedy-era Lucasfilm, but I'd say right now it's the most important one for them to double down on. For sequel trilogy haters, this series provides what they wanted to see from the sequels but didn't get. For sequel trilogy lovers, the story connects to and sets up the sequel trilogy. Mandalorian is the great equalizer, the great unifier. There's been cracks in that, but I think it can fully become the thing that Lucasfilm needs it to be. There's been news coming out about a new Star Wars trilogy in development from Lucasfilm with Simon Kinberg attached to produce. Now, many movie trilogies have been announced by Lucasfilm in recent years, with none of them coming to fruition. The reason this news is interesting, though, is because they may possibly be looking to make this trilogy episodes 10, 11, and 12 of Star Wars. This seems to be being considered because they see the main saga as the guaranteed big draw for the audience. It could also be the case that they're starting a new saga set after the Skywalker Saga, which I think that's more likely and is a better idea, but it's still not exactly what they should do right now. The best thing to do right now, from my perspective, is to make a Mandalorian movie trilogy. Now, they have announced and wrapped filming on the Mandalorian movie. It's coming out next summer 2026, and it's currently titled Mandalorian and Grogu. I say currently because I really hope they change the title. That's a terrible title. This one movie is directed by Jon Favreau, and they've also announced a movie that Dave Filoni will be directing that will serve as the finale to the Mandoverse, but we don't really know the nature of that. It sounds like a good idea, but those two movies and another season of Ahsoka are all we have confirmed for the Mandoverse right now. What I think they should do is go for making a Mandalorian trilogy with Mando as the main character. Jon Favreau's movie would be the first movie, of course, but Dave Filoni's would be the third movie. They would put a second movie in between those. The first movie can just be mostly him and Grogu, and that's what I expect, but I think it could have appearances from other big characters. The second and third, I would like to have larger, expanded casts of characters. I'd also like to see more of the original trilogy characters as well. The series seems to be loosely adapting the Heir to the Empire trilogy from Legends, which is Thrawn's first appearance, who has returned in canon in Season 1 of Ahsoka. To adapt it into new canon and not include the OG characters at all feels a bit wrong. Now, of course, we have seen Luke a bit, we've got Leia mentioned, but just not seeing them at all in this big galactic conflict would be just a little weird. And, of course, seeing these characters in their prime is what a lot of people were missing from the sequels. Personally, I'd be in favor of recasting, but I just feel like that's not what Lucasfilm is going to go for. Rogue One did prove they could do it, and they got Luke looking pretty good in Book of Boba Fett. I'm mostly okay with CG recreations as long as it actually looks good. Sometimes it looks really bad, and that is the most jarring thing ever. We know that Carrie Fisher was okay with CG Leia from Rogue One. I doubt Harrison Ford would care and would take the free bag. And that just leaves Billy D. And while they don't necessarily need Lando, I would like to see him. He, of course, also features in the Heir to the Empire trilogy and is, of course, a major player during this time period, so we should expect to see him. We could also see Mara Jade in the Mandoverse. We could see her officially introduced to canon. We could see Child Ben Solo in these movies and taken into Luke's New Order. These movies would quite literally be the new prequel trilogy. As long as they're good, and I have confidence they will be, I think they could be pretty universally accepted by the fandom. Famous last words. At the same time, though, I'd like to also see more seasons of Ahsoka and Mandalorian. I think each of those shows has 2 more seasons in them at the time of this video's release. Mando Season 4 and Ahsoka Season 2 would be between the first and second movie, and then Season 5 of Mando and Season 3 of Ahsoka, as the final seasons of those shows, would be between the second movie and the final movie directed by Dave Filoni, which ends the series. And other spin-off shows like Boba Fett and now Skeleton Crew can also be made, but Mando and Ahsoka are the main ones. As a note, I would like to see more Boba Fett. He doesn't need a Season 2, but he should have helped to retake Mandalore in Mando Season 3, and I'd like to see more of him in the Mandalorian show and or the movies. As for the second movie, for director, I'd go with one of your known goods. I'd personally go with Rick Famuyiwa. He did great with the Season 3 finale, he does great work for the show, and I think he deserves a Star Wars movie. That being said, you also have Bryce Dallas Howard, Peyton Reed, and now John Watts too, and several others. Lots of options for the second movie. With that though, you'd have a new trilogy with newer characters that you know will be popular from the success of the show. The presence of legacy characters can also make these movies feel more relevant to the Skywalker Saga, like Vader and Leia's presence did to Rogue One, thus bringing in that bigger audience that they think would require episodes 10, 11, and 12. They'd get the movie money, the Disney Plus money from the series going on there, and then the movies going on there, and the money from the physical media crowd like myself. As I said earlier, Mandalorian is the great unifier, and I think doubling down on it as the next big trilogy from Star Wars, the next big story from Star Wars, is the best idea right now. Not main episodes of the Skywalker Saga, but relevant to it and tell new stories while also adapting some old ones. The news we've been hearing lately honestly makes it seem like they want to move on from the Mandoverse, and I just personally think that would be jumping ship too soon before this story can reach its full potential. I want Lucasfilm to know that the Mandoverse should be the next big Star Wars trilogy and should be marketed as such. Next, I'm going to talk about something pretty small, pretty niche, but it's important to me. I think it's fair to say that a lot of viewers thought Rise of Skywalker wasn't as good as it could be. It felt like there was stuff missing from the movie, maybe? The thing about 9 is that, unlike other Star Wars movies, which all released with deleted scenes on the home version, there were no deleted scenes released whatsoever. The reason for this seems to be because of the nightmare production that it was, but I don't care. We know of the existence of deleted scenes, we have descriptions of some of them. There is supposed to be a longer sequence with Kylo Ren on Mustafar in the beginning, where he talks to this weird-looking creature, which sounds pretty cool, and I think that scene being longer would be good. There's another one which has Rey and Rose actually talk to each other. Crazy. I'd love to see this, and it can make Rose feel more like a part of the main group. There's also supposed to be more stuff with Rose and the superimposed Leia from Force Awakens deleted scenes. Apparently some of those scenes couldn't be finished with the time they had in post-production, but if they could finish them, or even release them unfinished, I'd like to see them. I'm sure there's even more that would be pretty good, but whatever we can get, please give it to us. Of all the sequel movies that needed deleted scenes, Rise of Skywalker was it, and you released none at all. At least give us those first two I mentioned, that would be something. But that's it for this section, though. Now I'm going to switch over to games for a bit. Obviously, I think all Star Wars gamers want to see a Jedi 3 game, and that has been confirmed to be in the works after the massive success of Jedi Survivor. I have a few ideas I'd like to throw out there, though, about what they could do. I'd first like to say that I would really love for Respawn to fix the PC port of Jedi Survivor. The game still runs like shit on my PC. 2 years later. I know for some the game works, but for me it's still completely fucked. And I can run games that look better than Survivor and are just as big, just fine. Also, these games do not need to be 130 gigs. Optimize your games, for God's sake. And Lucasfilm and EA, if they need more time to get it working better, give it to them. Okay, I needed to vent about that because before I talk about actually getting content from these games, I'd like to actually be able to play them. But now I'll go into what I'd actually like to see in the games. As I said, Survivor is 2 years old now, and a DLC would probably be a long shot, probably impossible, but I'd pay for it. I think a Tanalorr DLC, which gives us a huge map to explore in the endgame with some new light story content, would be really interesting. It's just a little disappointing that Tanalorr is such a small map when you've spent the entire game trying to get there. This would fix that. And the game is so much fun to play, I think players would like to be able to spend some more time in the game after the main story. The real thing I'd like to see, though, which, as I said, seems very likely to happen given the success of the first two, is a third Jedi game. I don't have many specifics I'm expecting besides a good game, but there are a few things I'd like to propose. Number one is an ending for Cal. Give us some sort of epilogue or something that explains why Cal isn't in the original trilogy. Maybe he retires on Tanalorr. I wouldn't blame him. Maybe he dies. I don't know how that would work with gameplay or how people would react to that, but whatever, it's an ending. I'd like some closure to that story and for it to fit nicely within Star Wars canon. If you find some way to write him out of the originals, but then make him able to come back in the Mandoverse like Ezra, that could be cool. Lots of fans and myself would love to see Cameron Monaghan play Cal in live action. That would be a really cool transition to see. My second thing is more of an idea that I think would be really cool to see. If it doesn't happen, I won't be disappointed, but I just think it's a cool idea. A story we haven't seen yet in the timeline is the fall of Darth Maul's drug empire between Solo and Rebels. In Solo, we see that Maul is still in charge of his drug empire that he built during Clone Wars. In Rebels, though, he has lost the entire thing and is alone. There is a Maul animated series coming, which is supposed to show how he maintained and built his drug empire during the reign of the Galactic Empire, if I'm understanding that correctly. I'm not sure if it will show how it all comes apart, though, but it doesn't need to, because this game, I think, is the perfect opportunity to show that. Following up from 3 excellent villains in Trilla, Dagan Gera, and Bode, I think Maul would be a perfect next level as the main villain in Jedi 3. As I understand, he was also originally considered to be in Fallen Order, and his place was taken by Taron Malicos because of timeline reasons. This would really bring the trilogy full circle, and it's a great way to fill in a missing story in the timeline. And a whole game with Darth Maul as the main villain, with us dismantling his drug empire, that sounds pretty cool, right? This is the 3rd game, and I'm expecting another time jump close to 5 years, like what happened with Survivor. That puts this story around when Andor happens, and just before the Rebels animated show, which is the one where Maul is on his own. And this would also put Cal more in his Jedi Master phase, or at least this game would probably be somewhat about him achieving Master. He'll probably be training Kata, too. So I think this level of threat in Maul and his empire would match the threat level the story demands. Adding on to that, my 3rd and final request is one small thing that I am actually expecting to happen in the 3rd game, and that is to fight Vader as Cal, and not just run away like we did in Fallen Order. Cal has become much more skilled, and is actually able to take Vader on now. I don't expect him to win, but to stand a chance more so than in Fallen Order. I expect an actual boss battle with him. Now that's it for what I expect from the Jedi games. There's one other series I'd like to talk about, and that is, of course, Battlefront. I would absolutely love to see Battlefront 3. Now, Battlefront 3 has been making the rounds lately, with basically every YouTuber and commenter talking about it, trying to show Lucasfilm and EA that we want Battlefront 3. And all I have to say about that is, keep going. They are leaving money and fan happiness right on the table. Battlefront 2 was a really great game with just a bad launch, and it's in a pretty good state in its final form, but there was potential for so much more. The modding community on Battlefront 2 is going crazy right now and keeping that game alive, which I'm unbelievably happy about. I'd like to actually see Lucasfilm and EA officially continue service on Battlefront 2 or make Battlefront 3 and have a good launch and proper support well after launch. I'd really love to see a big final update for Battlefront 2, something that fixes some of the quality of life issues and gives us some things that really feel missing, like loadouts, private matches, a capital ship phase for Age of Rebellion era supremacy, maybe some new heroes that really feel missing, like Padme, Jango, Poe Dameron, Commander Cody, and some of the missing heroes from Battlefront 1. Have one big update for Battlefront 2 to finish the game, so we have something to play for the several years before Battlefront 3 releases. I don't think they really need to go into the expanded media in Battlefront 2. I would have loved for them to do that if support continued, but as it is right now, it doesn't need to. Battlefront 2's focus can just be the main saga, but they should go into expanded content in Battlefront 3 and go way deeper into the timeline than 2 ever could. I am planning on making a video regarding Battlefront 2 and what I'd like to see regarding a potential final update and what I'd like to see in a Battlefront 3. That can have a whole other video dedicated to it, so that's it for my Battlefront ramblings in this video. Be on the lookout for a Battlefront video from me if that's something you'd like to see. Leave a comment, leave a like as well if you want to see that. I'll just finish this section by saying that a Battlefront 3, which has content from all over Star Wars and has big updates for whenever a new show or movie comes out, that would be really peak. It would constantly be either bringing people back or bringing in new players. The content drops and the release of whatever show or movie would just boost each other. It'd make Lucasfilm more money, and it would make fans happy. That's it for my Star Wars gaming section. I, of course, love Star Wars games and just want to see more. There's a lot announced that I'm very excited about, but I just don't have anything to say about them. With the next things on the list, we're going back to movies and shows, and the next thing I want to talk about is the Donald Glover Lando movie. It's supposed to be in some form of development, maybe? I feel like we keep hearing they're making it, and then they're not, and then yes, then no, and so on. I'd just like to say, for the record, to Lucasfilm, yes, I would like to see the Donald Glover Lando movie. I would pay for a ticket to go see it. I really enjoyed Solo, and I loved Glover as Lando. He was a perfect young version cast, and it's apparently being written by Steven and Donald Glover, the two brothers who brought you Atlanta, which is a very, very good show. I'd love to see what they could do with a Star Wars movie. This movie can act essentially as the sequel to Solo. I'd love to see the return of Alden Ehrenreich's Han Solo in the same capacity we saw Lando in his movie. Plus, if you exclude Lando from the Mandoverse, this can make up for people demanding Lando content. Of course, if you can't get Donald Glover, just don't make the project. As a title recommendation, I would absolutely go with the Calrissian Chronicles, or maybe just Chronicle because it's one movie, but you get the idea though. Please, make this movie. The next thing I want to talk about is an animated show set between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, which does for the sequels what Clone Wars does for the prequels. I'd love to see an anthology series here about this war, like Clone Wars. I think there's great ways to expand it. Of course, I'd want to see this series after they've completed the Mandoverse so that it can line up with and build off of it. You could delve further into Kylo Ren becoming Supreme Leader and him having to maintain respect among the First Order. You could also use the idea from Colin Trevorrow's Episode 9, which was Luke's Force Ghost appearing and sort of haunting Kylo Ren. We could see more of Leia training Rey. We could get a better idea of what's going on across the galaxy during this war. There's lots of cool things they could do that would elevate the sequel era. I'd also like to see it done with the Clone Wars style animation. As I said, though, I wouldn't want to see this until after the Mandoverse so that they have that whole thing to build off of. I would probably start putting it into production now, though. Get some writers and give them a while to work while the Mandoverse is still coming out and while the animation team is working on the Maul series. This is the show I'd really like to see from the animation team, and I want them to put a lot of time in beforehand. And on that note, more Tales, please. Tales of the Underground came out recently, and I thought it was fantastic. I was a bit surprised because there was a 2-year gap between Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Empire, but if these Tales series are a yearly May 4th thing, I'm very happy with that. Either way, though, I'm just glad they're continuing to make animated shows. I'm very excited for the Maul series. Going on from the sequels, though, I'd like to talk about the Rey movie that seems to be in development hell. I'd like to state my opinion that, yes, I would be interested in seeing this movie. I do not want to see an entire new trilogy starring her, nor do I want in episodes 10, 11, and 12 where she dies in the first or second. They could just do a standalone movie with her, similar to the Obi-Wan series that should have been a movie. If you're going to delve into this post-Skywalker Saga era, though, I have some demands. The sequels were about learning from past mistakes and changing ourselves and regimes, such as the Jedi and the Republic, for the better. I want to see how this new government, maybe not a republic, is able to prevent the rise of fascism and dictatorship effectively, in the way the creation of the Empire and their return with the First Order wasn't prevented. I'd also like to see how Rey has changed the Jedi Order for the better, made it healthier, namely, stop taking children from their parents and allow relationships with people. Maybe this still causes problems, but just explore that. The point of the sequels, or at least one of them to me, was to reflect on what the main saga taught us and learn from the mistakes of the past. We should see the outcome of that conclusion, change some things up. Don't go creating a new era 30-something years after the sequel trilogy just yet, though. They seem to want to set the Rey movie about 15 years after The Rise of Skywalker, which seems like how long it's going to take to actually get this movie made, but this is a good time period. It's enough that a lot of progress will have been made in the galaxy, and we can see that in that point in time. We also have the Starfighters movie from Sean Levy that is also set after 9, but I expect before the Rey movie. Having these two projects and maybe a Disney Plus series to explore the post-main saga galaxy would be pretty good, and I think can help lead into the next saga after the Skywalker Saga. And that, of course, brings me to the next saga of Star Wars and what I'd like to see from it. I think they could definitely do movie sagas during the Dawn of the Jedi or Old Republic era. A lot of people would love to see that, but I'll talk about those a bit later. Here, I'd like to talk about what I'd like to see from a new saga set chronologically after the Skywalker Saga. And basically, it's the Yuuzhan Vong War. I'd like to see something like that adapted into canon as a post-Skywalker Saga story. As I said, the main saga is about learning from mistakes and building a better government and Jedi Order, a better world for people. When I say world, I mean galaxy, but you know what I mean. We should see successful change in the Starfighter and Rey movie. We should see how the galaxy has improved. But then these improvements need to be challenged. This galaxy, which has healed and grown stronger from the Skywalker Saga, needs to be put to the test. And having an extragalactic invading force is the perfect idea for that. It's not the Empire again, which at a bare minimum is what the next saga needs to avoid. But this would be such an interesting new concept for a Star Wars movie or saga to tackle, and we've even maybe seen it set up with Ahsoka going to a different galaxy. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Yuuzhan Vong, but a formidable extragalactic force. The Yuuzhan Vong series is very long, and they have a lot of material to pull from. They can take the good, leave the bad, but I think this type of story is the natural saga to do after the Skywalker Saga chronologically. This also brings me to James Mangold's Star Wars movie. This is also in some unknown stage of development. I hope it happens, though. This movie is supposed to be about the first Jedi, and the title right now is Dawn of the Jedi. This would be a long, long, long time before the Skywalker movies. I think they could do a trilogy or even a saga during this time period. They did work with Mangold on Indiana Jones, and that had a massive budget but bombed pretty hard at the box office. I thought it was a pretty good movie, but I guess people aren't that interested in Indiana Jones movies, at least not enough to warrant a $350 million plus budget. I didn't really want any more Indiana Jones movies after that one anyway. I thought it was a good ending. Maybe that hampers this Star Wars movie's chances, but I hope not. It's a great idea, and Mangold makes great films and has big successes behind him like Logan. I would maybe do this as the next trilogy after the Mandoverse. After producing a lot of content which relies heavily on the Skywalker Saga, I think audiences would appreciate a brand new story with no strings attached. I'll also briefly talk here about the other movies that are supposedly in development. You've got Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron. I would love to see an X-Wing Squadron movie. I really like Patty Jenkins as a director. I think she could do great in Star Wars. There's also supposed to be a movie from Taika Waititi. I enjoy these directors, and I guess I would be interested in movies from them, so sure. Take the time you need to make these good, but I'd be interested to see them when they come out. There, of course, were also reports from before The Last Jedi came out that Rian Johnson would be directing his own Star Wars trilogy. I, of course, would love to see this, but I'm going to take it a step further. I think Lucasfilm could stand to push itself outside Star Wars a bit, and not return to a different old franchise like Indiana Jones or Willow, but try to make a new franchise in the 2030s. And I think they might have just the guy to do it. This guy is creative, and I think just what they need. He has wrapped on his third Knives Out movie, which is coming out soon, which is an incredibly successful new franchise he's made, so he can make a franchise. And if he's looking for something new after that, I think Lucasfilm should be the ones to produce it, even if it isn't Star Wars. I know I said this was a Star Wars list, but what's good for Lucasfilm is good for Star Wars, and I think this could be really good. I've put in ideas now for 2 new Star Wars trilogies/sagas, plus standalone movies and shows. I think they could stand to do something new as well. This brings me to basically the last thing on the list, minus a couple other ideas I want to throw out, but the last thing here, and I might get a lot of crap for this in the comments, is I'd be interested in seeing Acolyte Season 2. This show had issues, but not such massive ones that they took me out of the interesting story they were telling. We got to see a lot of cool stuff in this series, badass lightsaber fights, one after another. Episode 5 was some of the coolest Star Wars stuff I've seen, and they were not afraid to just kill off characters like nothing. This show was always going to get massive hate, and Lucasfilm had to have known that. The real issue I think this show had was the budget. They went way over budget of their already massive budget of $180 million, ballooning up to $230 million. Compare that with $120 million for one season of Mandalorian and bigger success with Mandalorian. They very clearly did not know how to manage a budget on this show. I'm not sure why they threw endless money at this. I don't see anything in this series that would demand so much more money while shows of similar production quality like Kenobi or Ahsoka are made for so much less. I would be curious, though, if they could get a Season 2 greenlit, if they could lower the budget to $120 million or less and not go over. To me, it seems like the problem was that somebody was just terrible at managing the budget. Teach them, bring in somebody new, whatever. Bring the budget down so you can possibly get a Season 2. You don't need to pay Lee Jung-jae anymore, so there's that. This video isn't a review, so I'm not going to spend time trying to defend this show, but I'll say that I enjoyed a lot of it, and I'd be very curious in what a Season 2 could do, especially with that Plagueis and Yoda tease in the finale. I'm not that crazy about the show. It's not without faults. I didn't watch it when it came out because I didn't care much for the idea. The dialogue can be pretty clunky, but that's not new to Star Wars. But the show was surprisingly good. I think the show deserves a second season, and I think they can make it a trilogy with a Season 3 if they wanted to. Apparently, they also wanted a movie after the 3rd season as well. And hey, if they can afford it, I'd be down. This obviously isn't super high on my list. It's towards the end of the video, but I'd like to see it. It's a cool new time period. To finish this list up, I'm just going to throw out some ideas of things I'd like to see. I've mostly been talking about projects that have been announced or are coming up in some way. But here I'll just throw out a couple of ideas that they haven't announced and aren't making right now, but just things I think would be cool to see. The first is that I'd like to see a live-action standalone Clone Wars movie. The Clone Wars was massive. There were tens of thousands of Jedi fighting and millions of clones across the whole galaxy. There's so many potential good stories that could be set in this rich era beyond what's been done in the animated show. You could use your DH technology on Tamara Morrison for the clones. You could also use it for cameos like characters from Obi-Wan and Anakin and maybe even Mace Windu. I'd like to see a live-action Clone Wars story in the vein of Rogue One. Get anybody from the Andor and Rogue One crew that stuck around to work on a Clone Wars project. We could also use some more spin-off movies around the sequel trilogy era, maybe a few years before The Force Awakens. That era could use some fleshing out. And the last thing, I think, is what you'll hear a lot of fans saying online, which is the Old Republic cinematics, but a feature-length live-action film. And I have to agree, that shit is badass. They are possibly still coming out with the remake of the Knights of the Old Republic game, so they may want to wait for that if that's still happening. Either way, though, you should really feel free to make movies in this era, Lucasfilm. And this is another era where I think they could do another saga. So that's 3 potential new sagas for them to do over the next many decades. But with that, though, that brings us to the end of the video. Those are the things I'd like to see most from Star Wars in the coming years and decades. If you'll recall, the release pattern for the first round of new movies from Lucasfilm was the sequel trilogy with spin-offs between them. I would call that Phase 1, if Marvel will allow me the term. The Mandoverse trilogy, with maybe the Starfighter and Rey movie in between, could be Phase 2. The phase after that could maybe be James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi trilogy with Waititi's spin-off movie in there, or something like that. After that could be Rian Johnson's either Star Wars or separate trilogy with the other ideas I gave for Star Wars movies in between. No matter the order, though, Star Wars can be set up for a while. You'll hear a lot of talk about how Star Wars is dead these days, but Star Wars is a galaxy full of infinite stories, and people will show up to see Star Wars. And creators love to create in Star Wars. There's so many possibilities for what they could do with the franchise. I have full confidence that Mandalorian and Grogu will be a hit, especially now that Avengers 5 has been delayed, and I hope that success will take them further. At the end of the day, though, I'm just a fan trying to tell Lucasfilm and share with other fans what I'd like to see from the franchise, and see if anyone else agrees with me. If you like what I had to say about some of these projects, or if you didn't, feel free to comment down below, but keep it civil. If you enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up. I've been Entropy, and thanks for watching.